Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Ask Us Anything Analytics. Today I have with me Blake Burch, who is the co-founder and CEO of Shipyard. Blake,
Hey
how's it
everyone,
going today?
it's going well. How are you?
Fantastic. Can you give the audience a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I run Shipyard. We are a data operations platform to where we're helping people connect their data tools end to end so that they can ingest the data, transform it, load it, refresh dashboards, run machine learning models, all under one roof with a high level of observability. And so my background before Shipyard, I used to run data teams for a digital ad agency called PMG. And there was building out programs that automated data flows for brands like Sephora, Gap, and OpenTable to be able to just deliver more ROI off the data that they had. And I didn't start in the technical space. Actually, back to the college days, I was music ed, got into marketing, and just decided, you know what, I'm tired of the monotony of some of what I was doing, and that led to some of the data and technical skills that I have today.
Nice. I actually saw on your LinkedIn profile that you used to be a drum teacher. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I used to teach private lessons for about like 20 kids that were between like sixth grade all the way to 12th. Just how to play percussion. So marimba, drum set, snare, timpani, all that good stuff.
That's
So
pretty cool. That's
yeah.
pretty cool. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to the show. I just want to call out that I did put in the comments on LinkedIn a link over to our YouTube channel. Some people feel more comfortable commenting over on YouTube. So if you want to hang out over there, they have a really nice integrated chat feature. Or if you want to stay here on LinkedIn, that's really cool too. And then you can just comment on the thread itself or on the post itself. Right in the comments, you could just put your questions there. Blake and I will take any questions that come in on LinkedIn or YouTube. So thanks everyone for joining. Looking forward to those questions. So I'm just going to kick us off here with the first question. Um, so you and I haven't met before. This is our first time meeting. So all I know about you is from your LinkedIn profile. So a lot of
Yeah.
my questions will be based from that. But what I noticed is you started out in marketing,
Mhm.
and as like it seemed like really very much on the business side, and then transitioned into the data side of the marketing team. Did I get that right?
That is 100% accurate. So, like, my first gig was effectively running paid search campaigns for the UK acquisition of Top Table that OpenTable had. So, we were trying to bid on restaurant names, bid on regions in London to get people to book at restaurants and stuff like that. But yeah, my transition was really born out of frustration from some of the stuff I was doing. I would having to download the data from Google Ads every single day and pull it into Excel and filter a few things out to choose what things that I want to increase bids for or what keywords that I want to get rid of. And I just got tired of having to continuously pull down that data manually, having to do
Yes.
those filters. And so I like reached out to the engineering team. Was like, how do I like not have to do this continuously? And that's how I kind of learned about like storing things in a database for SQL. And then, okay, now that I can run SQL queries to pull the same data filtered every single time and automatically calculate what I think new bids need to be, how do I update that directly in Google Ads without having to upload it? Oh, I need to learn how to interface with APIs with Python. All right. So it was just kind of a gradual journey there. And I think one thing that kind of tipped me over the edge was, I always forget to mention this, was like a key part of learning data, was working with like inventory feeds for some of the brands we had. So we had a lot of retailers. We were dealing with 60,000 SKUs being sent to us every hour to make sure that we could update what at the time was called like product listing ads on Google. And I was having to build rule sets to figure out how do we clean this SKU data consistently? And how do I make rules that can clean future products that I don't even know what they're going to be? And so through that process, it kind of made me realize that there was more opportunity than just managing those campaigns. How do I tie that stuff to other aspects of the business? And how do I make sure that more than just these paid campaigns is able to be run off of the inventory data? So that was really kind of a key thing for me, learning really
Very
learning about the data space. Yeah.
So what's really interesting to me about that is that you and I had a very, very similar start.
Yeah.
Different industries, but I was a business analyst for a call center. the manager showed me kind of the Excel reports that she had at that point, and it was basically like, average handle time or average wait. So average wait time and then average handle time, which is your wait time plus your talk time,
Yeah.
stuff like that for the call center. And she was showing me how she was manually putting this together. And right away, I was kind of like, okay, this seems repetitive. But then after doing it for like 6 weeks to 8 weeks, and it's the same steps every single week, the same copy and paste the formulas down, the same pivot tables, the same everything every week. I'm kind of just like, maybe, just maybe we can we can automate. Hence, like my first kind of data automation project. They didn't call
Yeah.
it engineering back then. It was like 2008,
Yep.
but yeah, that was my first data automation project, and boy, the rest is history.
Yeah.
That's really cool that we both started with a similar need, just like, hey, I got a business need here, and this seems redundant.
I honestly think that's the better way to do it. And so, like, even when I ran the data team at P&G, everyone spent 50% of their time on data problems, and they spent 50% of their times managing campaigns. And like the main reason behind that was one, I was kind of fearful about my team not driving enough ROI. So like I needed to validate it somehow. But the other thing is that it gives people ideas because they know what levers could actually be pulled in the business. They're not just like focused on like individual data points, table structure, making sure that things are clean. No, they have very specific things in mind that they want to solve with that data, which I think can be a huge boon in this space.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that kind of sticks with you forever, even
Yeah.
after you've been in the tech world forever on the data engineering side, and you're really very much into the ones and zeros of things. You're still kind of like, hey, what is the business meaning of this data? What is it telling me? And what do I think that the business managers want to see?
Yeah.
And I think that's hugely valuable for a data engineer.
Yeah, it really is.
Um, Someone did ask a question on our first ever live stream. Someone asked if they should be an analyst first or an engineer first if they really want to be an engineer. And what we talked about is, well, it's whatever you want to do. If you want to go for engineering, just go for engineering. But if you become an analyst first and you really learn the business and you work with a very experienced manager who's really good at creating KPIs and driving a business based on KPIs and actually making business changes based on the results of like
Mhm.
a dashboard or some data that's coming in, that's really invaluable experience that really sticks with you forever. So yeah, I do like the path of being an analyst first and kind of working your way into data engineer. But hey, if you're a Python geek and you went to college like for data engineering, there's nothing wrong with starting out that way. But that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. I think being able to see the business problems firsthand in the analytics world, anyone can pick up some of the Python skills to figure out how to use some of that stuff. I think it's much tougher to break into the business side once you have been more technical there.
Cool. Absolutely. So again, everyone, just get your questions in the chat. So chat on LinkedIn is just comments on the LinkedIn post, and chat on YouTube is obviously chat. So looking forward to some questions coming in here. So tell us about your transition from PMG advertising into becoming a co-founder and CEO of a company.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure, and the technology behind Shipyard was actually at PMG. We spun out from what we were doing there because we realized like literally every single one of these big clients that we're working with doesn't have a process for being able to manage their data end to end and use it effectively. But for me, the transition has been most interesting because I'm now in a spot where I have to focus a lot on what's happening in the data space, keep up to date with things, but I'm not doing as much data work myself anymore. Oftentimes it's dealing with the higher level, like business problems and
Sure.
sales and marketing and everything else that
CEO
goes along with
stuff,
that. Yeah,
startup
sure.
CEO
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. But hey, there still are moments where, like the other day, I was updating some of our DBT models for our product, right? Like, sometimes it happens. There's a need, and you got to do something, and it feels good to make sure, like, okay, yeah, I still can do this. Hasn't been a year, but
Yeah,
it's still possible.
totally. I listened to a podcast with Tristan Handy, the CEO of DBT,
Mhm.
and he mentioned that like he was getting his hands dirty in the DBT cloud, and found some things that he thought was a little bit hard to use, and then
Yeah.
said, "Hey, product team, we need to make product improvements based off of, I'm diving into the tool again." So
Yeah.
it's always cool to hear when CEOs are getting their hands dirty with SQL again. So
I think it's the same thing that we just mentioned about earlier, right? Like when you're actually doing the job, the levers to pull. You don't want to separate yourself from it too much. You want to try and make sure that you can actually use the tool that you're building and selling, and making sure that you're understanding the problems that people are still facing every day, making sure that the technology hasn't changed, the process hasn't changed, and that you can still bring some value to the table there.
absolutely. So I'm curious to go deeper on this like transition of like building Shipyard.
Yeah.
So did you like hire a software developer team, or did you develop it, or is your co-founder like how did it
Yeah.
actually what's
I
that?
I am not the product developer, that's for
Okay.
sure. One of the people that I worked pretty closely with at PMG, Eric Elskin, he's our co-founder that built out a lot of the underlying product, and he continues to lead out the engineering team to make sure that it's robust, it's secure, it's very well designed on that front. I can't do that. I'm focused more on like the product side. So a lot of it is talking to customers, figuring out what's needed, trying to make sure that we're able to make the right sort of features and everything that people need from data orchestration, from like ETL solutions, and trying to make sure that we're packaging that in a way that's easy and understandable and results in increased usage over time.
So this product was actually born internally at PMG?
Yep, that's 100% right. And it was bare bones at that time. Like internal tools are way different than tools that have to be like externalized where anyone can sign up. We had like a single page with tons of forms and inputs and things like that with no rhyme or reason. But like our core basis for the technology was just allowing our data team to be able to write and templatize Python scripts for our clients, so that when we were making something to update bids, we could apply that same sort of logic across every single client with a slight tweak about what data set the information was coming from initially, and like what their particular like ROI goals and needs were. So that was kind of like the genesis of just having some sort of repeatable, automatable solutions that the data team was able to own.
Cool. For anyone that is listening that doesn't know about Shipyard yet, so Shipyard is like an orchestration platform. So I liken it to Airflow, except it's like a low code, no code, low code Airflow. So it's a very like GUI based tool, but then you also have like a Python vessel, they're called, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like a widget, a Python widget, or they call them vessel because everything is related to ships and shipyards. So you can do all of your coding and kind of build out a chain similar to like you can in Alteryx, where you can drag and drop between tools. So you can just build up your dependency, and then you have a data pipeline. So I liken it to a cross between Airflow and Alteryx, maybe.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a pretty good example there. And
although
like
Alteryx is really heavy on the transformation side,
they
whereas
are. For
yeah,
us, the transformation, because like we made some decisions early on to make things super secure. Like we have ephemeral file storage, which means that whenever you run a workflow, the information is deleted afterwards for security purposes. Everything runs in individualized containers so that you can't have like package conflicts and things like that. These decisions meant that we can't actually like show you what the data looks like in the platform because we're not holding on to it. So transformations, you basically have to write most of them in Python if you're doing that, or do it as part of the SQL that you
or
run
DBT.
on
Yeah,
Snowflake or DBT. Yeah.
yeah,
Test it somewhere else and then run it and automate it on the platform.
exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is cool about the platform is the ability to like really easily with no code send Slack notifications, and also like you can like suck up a data table, like a small reporting table,
Yeah.
into a CSV file, and then like push that out to Slack.
Yep.
That's pretty cool because if you're doing that in Airflow, I mean, Airflow has a Slack package as well, but it's a little bit harder. So it's like
Yeah.
it's really democratizing this type of data pipelines for other people out there.
Yeah, I will say that it is very that's a very common use case for us. Just the data alerting, data reporting, sending it out there. But it literally takes like 3 minutes once you know the SQL you want and know where you want to send it in Slack.
Exactly. Cool. So let's dive more into analytics now that people know like what the product is. I just wanted to kind of like get that out there, but obviously this isn't a vendor pitch or anything.
I'm not trying to.
Yeah, no. I was directing it just so people know that it's a cool product that maybe they haven't heard of. Um, so as CEO of Shipyard, tell us like about what your analytics stack looks like. So obviously you use Shipyard, but what other ancillary tools are building up to reportings, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. For any of the tools that we haven't built, like Python scripts ourselves to load the data, or that we don't have blueprints for, we use Fivetran. We're using dbt core. We're using high touch to get some of that information into HubSpot on our side. And then we're connecting that all together and making sure that it runs seamlessly on our platform. We have event logging that we do through Segment. We are using Postgres for our production like replica database that we then store all the stuff together in BigQuery, and then we use a myriad of BI tools afterwards to make sure that we can visualize and show that information easily. But it's a pretty standard modern data stack that we have on our side.
So what BI tools are you using then?
We use Metabase for any sort of like internal data that needs to be more secure, that lives behind like our VPN and firewall and stuff like that. And for anything else, we're just using Looker Data Studio.
Cool. Do you want to respond to this one?
Yeah, sure. So we're yes and no. So Fivetran and Airbyte, they focus a lot on like building out 500 plus connectors that can load data from a SaaS tool into your warehouse. We have a lot of integrations with your common data tools and even with like CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce. But our main goal is to work with some of those integration partners so that you can kick them off and then connect them to something else to run afterwards. But you can run your own Python scripts to load data from any of those tools. We have integrations with like S3, SFTP, and all those regulars that you would do on Fivetran. But our goal is to be end to end. It's not just loading data in, it's loading data out, it's triggering jobs, it's sending reports, all that good stuff.
The dang 1984. Thanks for the question. So one of the, I will say, problems or features of the modern data stack is tool sprawl.
Yes.
So you have a lot of tools. So there are companies that have Fivetran and Airbyte.
Yeah.
And like Fivetran is connecting to some things because it's easy, and Airbyte might be connecting to other things because it's lower cost.
Yeah.
And with Shipyard, you can orchestrate them both. So you could do something like, hey, call the Fivetran API to load some Fivetran data. And when that's done, and only if it completed successfully, then kick off my Airbyte job. And when that's done, and only if it completed successfully, then kick off my DBT job or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's an orchestrator more than a data loader for sure.
Yeah. And so part of our thesis there too, because we do the low code and code together, like I got frustrated with tools like Zapier back in the day because inevitably they couldn't do one thing that I needed to do, which meant either choosing another tool or writing a script and living that separately. It's like, why can't we have both living together? So that's a big thing for us there.
Totally. And not just both, but it like really any tool, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm Sri Reddy from YouTube. Hi, Blake. Can you share any valuable advice you've learned throughout your career, especially for individuals looking to make an impact in the data and technology space?
I think the biggest thing for me is to actually talk to business users, try and understand what they're doing from a day-to-day basis, really figuring out the buttons that they're clicking, the tools that they're going into, the insights that they want to actually learn to do something in the business, and then figuring out how you can provide data to help support that initiative and maybe even automate that initiative along the way. I've generally found that a lot of data people get caught up in the cycle of trying to provide all the data and make it clean. And then it's like, why is nobody using this? Why is nobody looking at my dashboards or anything else? Is that you got to go one level further, which is truly understanding like the business problem. And sometimes you might not, but I think the opposite is true where like the business user doesn't always understand the data problem. And so if you can poke and prod them further of, okay, why do you want this data? What are you looking to achieve? How will this help you drive results for the business? That helps you get to like a much further state where you're able to create like true lasting impact and become a more valuable data team member for the organization.
Totally. I liked when you said, what buttons are they clicking? So like literally sit down with them and say, let's go through your process as it is today.
Yeah.
Like you're downloading a spreadsheet from SAP or something like that, and then you're doing some formulas, you're doing some pivot tables, and then you're going to start doing your job, and you're going to be looking at the spreadsheet and going into the system doing this
Yeah.
and that. So like really like find out what is their end-to-end process, and then figure out if you can like present them something in a dashboard or by any other means that's going to help speed that up for them.
Yeah, I think that's a super important note. Don't have them tell you what they're doing. Shadow them. Shadowing
Shadow.
reveals so many things. Don't judge. Just sit there silently, walk through the process, ask
Yep.
questions. But
Ask
shadowing
questions, be
reveals a
curious.
bunch.
Exactly. Another great thing that you mentioned, and I'll just kind of say it a different way. I had a BI manager back at Keurig. Her name was Kelly Bridges. And one thing I really took away from her was she said, when a user asks for a report, you ask them what they're going to do with it. And then when they tell you, say, and then what are you going to do with it? And then when they tell you that, then say, and then what are you going to do with it? And get all the way to the final end of the chain where you figure out that it's like, okay, then I'm going to download it to Excel. Like you're going to make a cool dashboard for me. I'm going to download it to Excel, and then I'm going to manually log into SAP, and I'm going to update a bunch of this stuff. Maybe they didn't need a dashboard. Maybe they needed an integration that actually did something for them.
Yep.
So like what I find is that business users sometimes will ask for something super specific when something else will serve them a little bit better. So if you can get all the way down to the deepest why, like their deepest why, I think that's really, really valuable. And then maybe you deliver something completely different than what they asked.
Yeah, totally agree.
See, we do have another question in here. So we got the dang 1984 once again. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube. Another question: if you were to rebuild Shipyard from scratch, what tools would you use now, especially in light of all the talk of the decline of the modern data stack?
Yeah, and I'd love if you can post some clarification. Like if you're looking for what would we do different with our analytics stack, or how would we build like the actual product differently? Because I think a lot of the technology that we chose is very sound. It's using AWS for everything under the hood, Go, React, um our like chosen package of choice for the front end is like Ant Design, which is fantastic, except when the documentation's only in Chinese, which is a partial problem there.
That's
But
funny.
I think one of the things.
Which
Sorry.
one is that is only in Chinese?
Ant Design. And so actually our entire like graph that we use for the drag and drop, that's even like more heavily in Chinese because it's made by the same people. Ant. That's something that I would undo or potentially change there. But if you're looking specifically for the analytics stack, thank you for the clarification. I don't know that I would do anything differently at the moment. Like there are some things that we don't use Fivetran for immediately grabbing the data, and it usually is like a cost concern, right? Because it's the monthly active rows. If we can
Yep.
build out the development for an integration quick enough to offset that cost, then we don't have to. But oftentimes, I feel like speed of getting access to the information is almost more important. So if I can easily grab the data from Fivetran and load it somewhere, great. I'm perfectly fine to do that. If I can use High Touch to immediately load the data somewhere that I need, great. Let's do that, because the engineering time and cost to make those solutions possible is not always worth it. And so it's the same thing even with Shipyard. Like half of our integrations are just designed to make sure that you can easily connect these tools together and make sure that you're not spending engineering effort along the way. So I feel pretty good about the technology that we've chosen from the data side, but I don't think the technology matters. Like if someone has the solution and helps you move the data, great, choose them, like move on. The tool doesn't matter as much as just getting access to the data quickly so that you can start driving more real value with it.
Totally. So we've mentioned Fivetran and Airbyte a bunch of times, but have you gotten into any of the other even lower cost extract and load tools? So we got Portable out there with over 1,000 connectors, and we got Estuary Flow, who is doing real time data for a fraction of the price of Fivetran. Have you looked into those at all?
I haven't looked into them directly, but I think when I've looked at some of the pricing, we're still spending less on Fivetran than we would on those tools. So
Oh, really? So your data is small then?
it depends. If it's too big, then it's something that we're just building out our own connectors directly in Shipyard and running it that way. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
portable is like 200 a month if you have like the smallest number of connectors, and then if you have, I think, more than 5 or 10, then it goes down to like 100 a month per
yeah,
connector. So I think flat fee is really cool, but if you're spending less than 200 a month in Fivetran, then like go you, I guess. But like
yeah.
one of my clients last year was paying like $16,000 a month just to
Phew,
load their Salesforce
that's
data
crazy.
into Snowflake.
But
So
but
for
that's the
that,
thing for us, like, we built out some connectors for, like, HubSpot and Salesforce to make sure that we could grab the data and load it somewhere without having to, spend for the millions of rows that
yeah,
would be coming through
yeah.
Fivetran, so just
I
cost
I
optimization
I
for
do
us.
have another client who's on the free tier of Fivetran, and it was the simplest thing to do, and it was actually free, so that was great. And that
Yeah.
was a hook into, what is it called again? Survey Monkey, right? So
Yep.
they have a survey. It's not a lot of data, but it's updated frequently by a number of different, like, of their clients.
Yep.
And they always want the latest data. So the job runs like every 3 hours,
Mhm.
because it doesn't matter how often you run it, it only matters how many rows it is. And if you're under, I think,
Yep.
500,000 active rows a month, the connector is free in Fivetran. So that is also a really cool thing
Yeah.
just to keep in the back of your mind.
And I would say one of the larger data sets on our side is probably going to be the segment event tracking information because that's effectively getting all the same data that we'd get out of like GA4 tracked individuals. It's like every single moment someone's doing something on the website, but that doesn't require an ingestion tool. It just dumps directly to, I believe in our case, just jumps directly to BigQuery. So like I don't have to have Fivetran in place for something like that.
So the last thing I want to comment on, this comment here from YouTube, is the decline of the modern data stack.
Yeah.
So what Tristan had suggested in his blog post when he was asking, is it time for us to not say modern data stack anymore, is just call it analytics stack.
Yeah.
It's all the same tools though. I don't think the stack is dead, but he's just saying maybe the word isn't useful or the phrase isn't useful anymore.
It's funny to me because I run monthly data meetups in Austin, and the biggest surprise for me initially was all of this chatter that happens online about the death of the modern data stack, the consolidation of or the rebundling of Airflow, data contracts, working with DuckDB. Nobody is talking about these things in person. Like it is very much a bubble online, and I don't put too much stock into us like having conversations about what terminology should we use to describe this because I don't think a lot of people are like fully keeping track of that at home. They're just behind their computers trying to get their job done and choosing whatever works. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It did make me wonder if I should redo my website though, because my website is very heavy on the modern data stack, and I have
Yeah.
like this Super Mario Brothers theme where like you start
Uh-huh.
going down a pipe at the top and you like funnel down the stack, and I was like, oh man, do I need to rethink my
Yeah.
website now that? But
There
no.
is merit in the fact that terms come with baggage. So, like, even on our side, we initially talked about us more as data orchestration, but now we're talking about ourselves as more of a data operations platform. The underlying product hasn't changed, but the idea of data orchestration was kind of it has to be open source. It's kind of a commodity, and people only think about it of kicking off external jobs, not as something that connects everything end to end or something that is low code or something that is proprietary. And so it's interesting to see that. I think this is just one of those things as well. It's just another term that we're trying to like rebrand a little bit to make sure that it works better. But we saw the same thing with reverse ETL becoming data activation. Now, most of those tools are trying to be like CDPs. It's just whatever flavor of the month is, but the underlying
Totally,
tools are the same.
the tools are the same, exactly. So you are now I think, fourth CEO I've had on this show, and I've asked every CEO the same question
Mhm.
about Excel and spreadsheets. So, what role does Excel or spreadsheets play at Shipyard? And I want to know both from inputs to a data engineering process, as well as outputs, or not even outputs, but just usage in that C-suite or in your finance team, whatever you want to talk about with Excel and spreadsheets.
Yeah, it still has its place for sure. I think ultimately it ends up kind of being like an end product where I'm just trying to grab a quick data point or pull something from a longer list. But in general, we we try to avoid it. I would say that there's some things we have internally for. Like aligning our pricing structure and making sure that everyone can agree on what the individual items are, or even internally, we use it for some things for like analyzing like customer usage. Like if you have a table and a dashboard, it's just an Excel sheet. There's no point in having the table there. Usually it's easier to access in Excel. But as soon as you're trying to do something collaborative, we do something on Google Sheets. But in general, we try to avoid that being the end product, other than for just some like ad hoc numbers or analysis or something that we're temporarily trying to resolve, get on the same page together, and then we move on.
Makes
Um,
sense. Does Google Sheets play a big role for your finance team?
yeah, it does. On our side, finance is still going to be locked heavily into some of those systems, so you can't really escape
Yep.
it. But you can try as hard as you want.
Yeah. And sometimes Excel or spreadsheets or even raw data dumps isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier on this call about alerting in Slack,
Mhm.
and sometimes I have a situation right now where I need to know every single day the number of parts or materials in a particular MRP system that don't have a planner assigned to them. And we don't want them to have to go out to Tableau and pull that data every day. We want
Yep.
to push that to them. So it's like, wake up in the morning, it's like, boom, here's your materials that don't have a planner.
Yep.
Go fix it. And a spreadsheet or even a CSV file, it's the right choice for that type of situation. So I think we as analysts and dashboard designers get sometimes offended when people want to use Excel, but like, get over yourselves, like
Yeah.
sometimes Excel is like, it's a good tool.
I think one interesting thing that you just made me think of is that Excel is great for a moment in time, because oftentimes the database itself is being updated continuously. And if you're trying to pull live into that information, you might see something slightly different from one day to the next. Having the output of Excel makes a lot of sense when you want to see what it was like at a particular moment, because most people aren't doing some sort of like historical analysis of what this value used to be and when it was changed in their database. They're just looking at the
Yeah,
live information.
that's right. But I'll also, I guess, push back on that a little bit though, because now Excel is becoming more powerful with Power Query being built right into Excel.
Mhm.
So if you want to have connections live into a database and like have an Excel thing that you could just click refresh on, you have that capability as well.
Yeah.
So it is the power is extending. It's pretty cool. But also it's pretty cool, but also I'd like to steer my clients in other directions as
Yeah.
well,
When I
because
sorry, go ahead.
you get the danger of the tangled web.
Yeah. I think what we call it internally is like shadow analytics. If you have too many people relying on Excel, you don't know how the data is being used. And so inevitably someone will be using it in some way that you didn't expect, or relying on some data that you were unaware of. And so figuring out how to get that in different tools so that you can have it as part of a fully orchestrated system is much better. So when you have data issues, you can let the right people know rather than them scrambling because you were unaware of their process that was
Yeah.
happening in Excel.
So shadow analytics is cool in a sense, because it's like there's your proof of concept or there's your prototype.
Yeah.
So when you have um in finance or supply chain or whatever the company is, a decent, we'll say, high skilled data person who's actually a business person, it's like they think like an engineer, and they're developing that shadow analytics. Sometimes that can really be a boon for the company, because then the BI team or the data engineering team can then come in and say, hey, show me what you're doing, and like we're
Mhm.
going to put a robust backend behind this.
Yeah.
um it's all about process though. So if you're the analytics manager or the data engineering manager, it's having a quarterly review of that shadow analytics.
Yeah.
Another thing that we've done at a few companies is we've created like a schema in Snowflake called end user zone, where we kind of let them do whatever they want. Like even if they don't have much experience, they can create tables and play, like have a full read write playground within Snowflake end user zone, with the process and stipulation that, hey, we're going to do a quarterly review of that end user zone. And anything that looks like it's business critical, mission critical, we're going to pull it back into that curated zone.
Yeah.
Now the trick is actually doing the quarterly review.
Yeah. making sure that when you do it, that you're fully exhaustive of the things you're covering and that nothing's
Yeah.
getting in there.
I just saw a question pop up. Let's check it out. Yeah, Sigma's entire thing is making it be like Excel, and from what I've heard, they're doing it really well. So I'm impressed with Sigma's technology. I've gotten their demo. I've spoken with their partnership team, and honestly, I'm extremely impressed. And I think it's priced just right. It's definitely on the more expensive side of BI tools, but um, I think it's priced right for what it's offering. And yeah, what I really like is that people are used to autofilter in Excel, and they just want to see kind of raw data autofilter and then make it look like, and then like make pivot charts, because people are kind of comfortable with pivot
Yeah.
charts, which is really what all BI tools are doing anyway. But yeah, I do think that Sigma kind of nails it. I haven't used it in production. I haven't installed it at any clients, but I have one client in mind who I think would be a great use case for Sigma. This is a company who is entirely run on spreadsheets. They had no ERP system. They had no database. This is, I don't want to give too much information, but they manufacture a physical product, a physical good, and they take orders and they ship physical goods, but doing all of this with a Microsoft Access backend. And they are going live on NetSuite. And when they go live on NetSuite, I would love to see them bring that NetSuite data into Snowflake. And because they're very spreadsheet and kind of Microsoft Access acquainted, I think that Sigma would just absolutely knock it out of the park for this company.
Yeah.
So totally, there's some great use cases there. Blake, have you seen Sigma used out in the wild?
So we've gotten a few questions about it and clients that are actively using it. I'm in the same boat as you that I haven't used it in production myself. I've seen it. I really like that it has more of the Excel focus, and I believe every single visualization you can see the underlying SQL under the hood. That's one of my favorite things for BI tools, when they give me, the data person, access to like how that visualization came to be. But other than that, I'm kind of the opinion that like most of the BI tools are interchangeable. It just kind of comes down to like personal preference. And so I'm kind of anti BI. That's something we could explore if you're curious. But like,
let's talk about it. Tell me about anti BI.
Like, so we help support those types of tools and what people are using from the BI perspective. But like, I think the story that you told about your BI director over at, I think it was Keurig,
Sure.
said is that I always feel like dashboards are the wrong end product for users, because oftentimes the story gets told that people don't look at it, or they just end up going to die. I think if you ask the question of how are you going to use this dashboard, what sort of action are you going to take from it, it reveals a process that you could fully automate to actually do the work and make the decision automatically, rather than necessarily needing to visualize it in some sort of BI tool. And so for a lot of the type of work that I do now, and even the type of work that I did previously, I avoided dashboards a lot of the time, because I want something where I can explore ad hoc, but ultimately the end result is putting a process in place that uses the data to feed some sort of system. And I think it's funny, the like dashboards are shiny objects. The business users love seeing them, but it's funny they just don't get interacted with as much as I think we, the data people, would typically like.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I have a slightly different take on it. So I'll say I definitely agree for the individual contributor who like has work to do, and if they're using the dashboard as the signal to actually like go do the work, maybe there's something that you could do there to help them automate. But where I think dashboards really shine is giving management a signal that they're going to control a process. So when I think about data and adding value with data, I always jump right to what is the business process that we're trying to control. So it could be keeping items in stock. So
Mhm.
first of all, my background is in physical goods supply chain. So not just consumer packaged goods, but like it could be like heaters, it could be like airplanes, it could be
Yeah.
like any type of like physical supply chain. So my examples will be that. But let's say you want to know. You want to track out of stock, you want to track on time shipments, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're like the senior vice president of supply chain, you want to know like how did I do yesterday compared to my average? How did I do this month compared to the same month last year? And I think dashboards are great for controlling process. In supply chain, we love Six Sigma. So if anyone out there like knows about Six Sigma or doesn't know, I'll just explain real quick. They have this thing called define, measure, analyze, improve, control, DMAIC. So you're going to define a KPI or you're going to define a business process that you want to control.
Mhm.
So let's just say that's going to be, I want to be able to have 99% of my items in stock all the time. So that's like your business process. Then you figure out how are we going to measure that? And then you decide how you're going to measure it, and you have your data team actually build a process to measure it. You analyze how you're doing. So you're now, you're getting deep into it. And then the last two, improve and control, are that's the dashboard is helping you do that. So you are literally using a dashboard to control a business process. And that's why I love dashboards. So
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
think they have a place. Don't get me wrong. I think
Yeah.
the best use of it is if you can make it a central mechanism for some sort of meeting. So like some things that I don't even consider to be dashboards really are like when our engineering team is doing planning in linear, it's looking at like the roadmap Gantt chart for what there is in progress. Technically, that's a dashboard, right? But I think what it comes down to is deciding if you're going to provide the information, how do you make it central to the conversation and to the decisions that need to be made continuously? But if you're just trying to have it available for someone to look at occasionally, that's where it kind of ends up falling off.
Totally. Totally. So this is actually a fantastic segue into the next question I prepared for you, which is, so what KPIs are you most interested in? And I'm going to take that spin as like, are there KPIs that you're using to control a business process or at least be informed of your results? So what are those KPIs and what are the frequencies that you're worried about them or that you're at least looking at them in?
Yeah, so like it differs based on like which part of the business we're really looking at, but I think a lot of it boils down to like what's driving traffic for the website to then drive signups, and then in the product itself for people that have signed up, what's our activation rates and retention, alongside just like usage increasing over time. And so for a lot of the product analytics stuff, like the dashboards that we do use, it's data that's generated from Segment. We use June to visualize it on our side, but we're not building the dashboards. It's more of like a exploratory thing. We're typically looking at stuff like we launch a new fixture. What does the activation rate look like, and how is that increasing over time? Okay, how can we potentially make some sort of change and then verify, is that going to update? Is that going to increase the adoption rate of that feature? And so, yeah, in those cases, I'm very hyper focused on a single feature, looking at it, making a decision, and moving on. But after that, I'm not using it anymore once we kind of get the activation rate that we're
Do
looking
you
for
have
there.
any like either like dashboards or other means to get KPIs that are actually pushed to your email or Slack versus you actually going to visit the dashboard and explore it?
I don't have too many things that are pushed directly to me. A lot of it is
Okay.
having to go look separately.
Perfect.
It,
Yeah,
the,
it's interesting, just different
yeah,
people's approach there. I had one manager at Keurig who was like, if the picture of the dashboard is not embedded in the body of the email, no one is ever going to look at it and no one is ever going to open it. Like if it comes as an attachment, people are just, they're not going to open the attachment. And I tend to agree with him. Like,
yeah,
honestly, I think he's 100% right. So I think push is cool sometimes, but other times it's like, hey, you know what you want, you know where to go get it. So then you
yeah.
just don't clutter your email box. So I totally see both sides uh, of the coin there.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's still a little bit of the IC data person mindset. I know where to go look for the information that I need, so I'll go and dig and find it. I'm not yet at the point where I need to just be surfaced to me all the time.
Totally. Um, your favorite BI tool?
Um, Again, I find a lot of them to be interchangeable. I'd say favorite is probably what I'm most comfortable with, which is going to be Metabase or Looker Data
Metabase.
Studio. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, and Looker Studio too. Wow, cool. I haven't really done Looker Studio yet because it's expensive, right? Isn't it? Like it kind of starts at
So
like
they're,
25K.
it's funny, their whole naming. It used to be Google Data Studio. Now it's called Looker Data Studio. It's still a free product.
Oh,
Um,
that one. Okay,
it's
so
still
Looker
directly,
versus Looker Data Studio. Yes,
yeah, yeah,
I knew that distinction once upon a time and just forgot it right now.
yeah, yeah. Their naming doesn't do it any favors, but yeah.
Totally. Um, Yeah, Metabase is cool, especially because you can use it for free, and then if once you grow out of like self-hosting it, then you can. Do you use their cloud hosted or do you
We
use
do
the
it
self?
self-hosted, and the main reason behind that is any of our security-related information we have to keep behind like VPNs and firewalls, so that only we can access it. So that's kind of our reason for using it on the back end there.
Cool. So hey, LinkedIn and YouTube, let us know if you have any questions. So once again, so if you want to ask a question on LinkedIn, that's just right in the comments section on this post that you're currently watching, and on YouTube, right in the chat right there, we'll take any questions. Um, So I think we kind of covered advice for people getting started in engineering and analytics, but is there anything else that comes to mind that we didn't discuss when talking about Amshri's question that we looked at before, which was this one? Is there anything else, any other advice for people getting started?
Yeah. A lot of times when people are getting started, also, I think they get caught up in when should I use this versus that, and like which tutorials should I follow, and what sort of learning resources should I use. And like in general, like my advice is just to find some sort of problem that matters to you and figure out how to explore it and do things with that. Like I think a great resource is a lot of people use like Spotify for their own music. The Spotify API has some crazy information in it. Not only like your listening history, but for like individual songs. What are their beats per minute? Like what notes are played at specific points in time? And there's a lot of interesting analysis that you could do even with just personal data that might start to teach you, oh, okay, this information is structured in JSON. How do I grab that using Python? Okay, how do I turn the JSON into a CSV to be able to store it in a database? Okay, where do I want to store it? Do I want that to be on like Postgres, or do I want it to be on something like DuckDB locally? Do I want to use the BigQuery free tier? It doesn't matter. Choose one, try and see if you can load the information into it. Okay, now can I query it with SQL to try and get the information that I want, and so on and so forth. Like it's very much about finding some specific thing you want to figure out and achieve, and like leaning into it heavily. But I would also
Totally.
say being aware of when you're not using the right tool for the right job, when it just kind of gets unwieldy. So like back to our conversation for Excel. One of my bigger regrets is how much time I spent learning like Excel formulas, to where I used to write things that were, I kid you
Yep.
not, probably like
Me too.
14 lines long with 6 nested if statements for things. Like, no, at that point, learn to like take that code and put it or take the data and put it into Python. Or if you're having to write like a super long SQL statement because you need to use a bunch of with tables because it's not easy to like store variables, like that's when maybe you should try and bring Python into the picture. But I even like between those tools, Excel, SQL, and Python, people tend to ask which is better. Like neither. They're
Yeah.
just good for different use cases, and if you end up with like unwieldy statements for the problem you're trying to solve, try and see if it works easier or better in the other tool.
Nice. I actually wrote down Spotify API as you were talking there because people reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time because I do a lot of content on LinkedIn geared towards beginners, kind of
Yeah.
like intro content, if you will.
Yeah.
People reach out to me all the time, like, "Hey, I want to do a project. Like, what should I do?" And it's like, well, whatever you're interested in. But I think, yeah, Spotify API is cool because it's so ubiquitous. Everyone uses Spotify and everyone likes music of
Yeah.
some kind. So I
I
think
think
that's
you
going to become my default suggestion.
I think you could generalize it even further. I think a lot of data people fail to like try to work with some sort of public API, and just having like an underlying foundation of what it means to make a GET request versus a post request, how to like navigate the responses that are given there. That's all of that's most of what data work is, right? The ingestion is
Yeah.
just calling an API, taking the JSON, transforming it to some sort of CSV structure. So getting comfortable with reading through API documentation, figuring out how to play with that, using something like Postman to easily like test out and try different queries. That'd be like a pretty high suggestion on my side too to get started with more data work.
Nice. Another cool thing that they can try instead of trying to turn the JSON into a CSV structure is load the JSON directly into Snowflake as a variant column and then see if you can unnest that JSON into multiple tables once it's in Snowflake.
Yeah.
That's another very fun and cool and super practical process to go through.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't see any more questions coming in from chat here. So I think we're going to wrap up a little bit early.
All right.
Blake, did you have any questions for me before we drop off here?
I don't think I really did. I appreciate you having me on the show and answering the questions from people that shared with us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining. This has been really fun. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. See everyone
Thanks.
later. Bye.